In 1962, Charles Van Doren, who was later a senior editor at Britannica, said, "The ideal encyclopedia should be radical. It should stop being safe." But if you know anything about the history of Britannica since 1962, it was anything but radical. Still a very completely safe, stodgy type of encyclopedia. Wikipedia, on the other hand, begins with a very radical idea. And that's for all of us to imagine a world in which every single person on the planet is given free access to the sum of all human knowledge, and that's what we're doing. So Wikipedia, you just saw the little demonstration of it. It's a freely licensed encyclopedia. It's written by thousands of volunteers all over the world in many, many languages. It's written using wiki software, which is the type of software he just demonstrated. So anyone can quickly edit and save, and it goes live on the internet immediately. And everything about Wikipedia is managed by virtually an all-volunteer staff. So when Yochai is talking about new methods of organization, he's exactly describing Wikipedia. And what I'm going to do today is tell you a little bit more about how it really works on the inside. So Yochai showed you the graph of what the cost of a printing press was, and I'm going to tell you what the cost of Wikipedia is, but first I'll show you how big it is. So we've got over 600,000 articles in English. We've got 2 million total articles across many, many different languages. How popular we've gotten to be, we're a top 50 website, and we're more popular than the New York Times. So this is where we get to Yochai's discussion. This shows the growth of Wikipedia. We're the blue line there, and then this is the New York Times over there. And what's interesting about this is that the New York Times website is a huge, enormous corporate operation with I have no idea how many hundreds of employees. We have exactly one employee, and that employee is our lead software developer. And he's only been our employee since January 2005, all the other growth before that. So the servers are managed by a ragtag band of volunteers. All the editing is done by volunteers. And the way that we're organized is not like any traditional organization you can imagine. People are always asking, well, who's in charge of this or who does that? And the answer is anybody who wants to pitch in. It's a very unusual and chaotic thing. And everything is managed by the volunteers, and the total monthly cost for our bandwidth is about $5,000. And that's essentially our main cost. We could actually do without the employee. So how is all this governed? I mean, people really want to know about, administrators, things like that. So the Wikipedia governance model, the governance of the community, is a very confusing but a workable mix of consensus, meaning we try not to vote on the content of articles because the majority view is not necessarily neutral. Some amount of democracy. All of the administrators, these are the people who have the ability to delete pages. That doesn't mean they have the right to delete pages. They still have to follow all the rules. But they're elected. They're elected by the community. Sometimes people, random trolls on the internet, like to accuse me of handpicking the administrators to bias the content of the encyclopedia. I always laugh at this because I have no idea how they're elected, actually. There's a certain amount of aristocracy, and so you got a hint of that when I mentioned like Rick Kay's voice would carry a lot more weight than someone we don't know. I give this talk sometimes with Angela, who was just re-elected to the board from the community, to the board of the foundation with more than twice the votes of the person who didn't make it. And I always embarrass her because I say, well, Angela, for example, could get away with doing absolutely anything within Wikipedia because she's so admired and so powerful. But the irony is, of course, that Angela can do this because she's the one person who you know would never, ever, ever break any rules of Wikipedia. And I also like to say she's the only person who actually knows all the rules of Wikipedia. So, and then there's monarchy, and that's my role in the community. So I was describing this in Berlin once, and the next day in the newspaper, the headline said, "I am the Queen of England." And that's not exactly what I said, but the point is, my role in the community, within the free software world, there's been a long-standing tradition of the benevolent dictator model. So if you look at most of the major free software projects, they have one single person in charge who everyone agrees is the benevolent dictator. Well, I don't like the term benevolent dictator, and I don't think that it's my job or my role in the world of ideas to be the dictator of the future of all human knowledge compiled by the world. It just isn't appropriate. But there is a need still for a certain amount of monarchy, a certain amount of sometimes we have to make a decision and we don't want to get bogged down too heavily in formal decision-making processes. So as long as people trust me in my role, then that's a valid place for me. Of course, because of the free licensing, if I do a bad job, the volunteers are more than happy to take and leave. I can't tell anyone what to do. So the final point here is that to understand how Wikipedia works, it's important to understand that our wiki model is the way we work, but we are not fanatical web anarchists. In fact, we're very flexible about the social methodology because it's ultimately the passion of the community is for the quality of the work, not necessarily for the process that we use to generate it. Thank you.
What I'm going to do in the spirit of collaborative creativity is simply repeat many of the points that the three people before me have already made, but do them. This is called creative collaboration. It's actually called borrowing. But do it through a particular perspective, and that is to ask about the role of users and consumers in this emerging world of collaborative creativity that Jimmy and others have talked about. It's when the internet combines with these kinds of passionate pro-am consumers who are knowledgeable, they've got the incentive to innovate, they've got the tools they want to, that you get this kind of explosion of creative collaboration. And out of that, you get the need for the kind of things that Jimmy was talking about, which is our new kinds of organization. Or a better way to put it, how do we organize ourselves without organizations? That's now possible. You don't need an organization to be organized, to achieve large and complex tasks like innovating new software programs.